Few creations are as powerful and as dangerous as the teen idol. A marketing machine projects a face, a smile, and a dream, selling it to millions. But what happens to the real person behind the product? When your identity is manufactured, before you even know who you are, the mask becomes the face, and the world's applause can sound like the echo of an immense void. Today on The Truth, Dark Psychology, we will analyze the trajectory of one of the biggest idols of his generation, and the dark psychology of living as everyone's dream, but your own. If you seek to understand the cracks behind the perfect facades, subscribe and join us. The truth behind the smile is always the most revealing. Before he was an actor, Zac Efron was a product, launched into stratospheric stardom by High School. Musical _ he was the personification of the adolescent dream, the popular, athletic, sensitive, and talented boy that every girl wanted and every boy wanted to be. This was not an organic identity. It was image engineering in its purest state. The Disney machine, a master of creating marketable archetypes, built around him a perfectly safe, harmless, and profitable persona. Every interview, every appearance, and every musical note was meticulously controlled to reinforce this image, creating an idol who was, above all, a reliable brand for mass consumption. The psychology behind this creation is that of a prefabricated identity. For a child or adolescent whose identity is still forming, having a persona imposed from the outside is psychologically dangerous. The young Efron had to repress his own uncertainties, flaws, and desires to fit the mold of Troy Bolton. This constant repression of the authentic self in favor of an idealized mask generates a deep internal disconnection. The applause and adoration from the public are not for him, but for the construct, for the character, deepening a feeling of fraudulence and loneliness that external success cannot fill. This image engineering also creates a golden prison. Once the public falls in love with the perfect idol, any deviation from that standard is seen as a betrayal. This places immense pressure on the individual to maintain the performance 24/7. The fear of disappointing, of tarnishing the clean image, becomes a paralyzing burden. From a dark psychology perspective, this is a form of control by affection. The audience's adoration is not unconditional. It depends on the maintenance of the mask, forcing the idol into a life of constant vigilance over his own actions and emotions. The impact of this fabrication extends into adult life. When the idol tries to break free from the initial mold, he faces resistance from both the industry and the public. Every darker role, every change in appearance, is a battle against the shadow of his manufactured self. Efron's attempt to reinvent himself with more complex and physical roles can be seen as a desperate fight for authenticity, a cry to prove that he is more than the smiling boy from a teen musical. It is an attempt to kill the product so that the man can live. Ultimately, the story of Zac Efron's rise is a case study on the cost of early fame. It shows us how the entertainment industry can, in its pursuit of profit, sacrifice the psychological development of its young talents. The construction of an idol is an act of depersonalization. In giving the world the perfect dream, the individual behind it can be left with a silent nightmare, that of looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person they see, because that person never had the chance to become who they really were. After the end of his teen idol phase, Zac Efron's struggle for identity took a visible and drastic form: the transformation of his body. For roles like Baywatch, he sculpted a physique that was almost superhuman, an embodiment of a hegemonic masculinity ideal. This obsessive pursuit of physical perfection can be analyzed as a form of addiction transference. Having struggled with alcohol and substance abuse, the extreme discipline and control required by bodybuilding offered a new way to focus his addictive energy. The control over his muscles became a substitute for the control he felt he lacked over his own life and career. From a psychological standpoint, the construction of this body armor serves multiple purposes. Firstly, it is an attempt to violently distance himself from the image of the skinny, harmless boy from High School Musical. It is a visual declaration that he is no longer that kid. Secondly, the hyper-masculine physique functions as a shield. In an industry and a society that often equate vulnerability with weakness, a muscular body projects an image of strength and invulnerability, protecting the fragile inner self from external pressures and judgments. The armor of muscles hides the void and insecurity. However, this escape into the physical is a trap. Efron himself admitted to suffering from insomnia and severe depression during the preparation for Baywatch, stating that the look was not really attainable in a healthy way. This reveals the dark nature of the addiction to perfection. The pursuit of an unattainable ideal leads to self-destruction, masked as self-discipline. The use of diuretics and extreme regimens is not about health. It is about the appearance of health, a performance of vitality that, paradoxically, drains the life from the one performing it. The body becomes just another costume, another mask to be worn. This obsession with the body also reflects a broader cultural pressure on masculinity. The idea that a man must be strong, resilient, and physically imposing is a powerful narrative that many internalize. Efron's journey mirrors that of many men who use the gym as a way to cope with emotional pain, building up the exterior to avoid confronting the interior. The problem is that muscles can carry weight, but they cannot heal trauma. The pain simply finds other ways to manifest, such as the anxiety and depression he reported. The lesson here is about the seduction of an external solution for an internal problem. The belief that a perfect body will lead to happiness or respect is a dangerous illusion. Zac Efron's story with his physique is a cautionary tale about how the pursuit of perfection can become a prison as limiting as any other. The armor he built to protect himself from the world also isolated him from himself, proving that true strength lies not in the muscles, but in the courage to be vulnerable and authentic, one of the most consistent tools in Zac Efron's arsenal. Since the beginning of his career is his infectious charisma and his million-dollar smile. Even in his most difficult moments, the public persona rarely wavered. This smile, however, can be interpreted not as a sign of genuine happiness, but as a highly effective defense mechanism. In psychology, reaction formation is a mechanism where a person expresses the opposite of what they truly feel. The constant smile can be a mask to hide deep sadness, anxiety, or the inner void he has confessed to feeling. Charisma, in this context, becomes a tool of social control. A smile is disarming, creates an instant connection, and deflects deeper questions. It's a way to keep people at a distance, offering them a pleasant surface so they don't try to look at what lies beneath. For someone who grew up under public scrutiny, learning to turn on the charm is an essential survival skill. Efron became a master at projecting an image of well-being and accessibility, even when he was battling inner demons like addiction and agoraphobia. The cost of using charisma as a shield is the deepening of loneliness. When you are constantly performing happiness, it becomes almost impossible for others to see your real pain and offer genuine support. You imprison yourself in your own performance. The people around you interact with the mask, not the person. This may explain why so many celebrities who seem to have it all report feeling incredibly isolated. The smile that makes them beloved by the world is the same one that prevents them from being truly known. This dynamic also creates a cycle of self-delusion. After performing happiness for so long, the line between the mask and the real self can become dangerously blurred. The person might start to believe they should be happy, feeling even more inadequate and broken for failing to be so. The empty smile doesn't just deceive others. It ends up deceiving oneself, suppressing emotions that need to be processed and validated. It's a form of self-gaslighting, where you invalidate your own pain because it doesn't fit the narrative. You project. The dark lesson that Zac Efron's smile teaches us is about distrusting perfect surfaces. Charisma can be a weapon, a defense, or a disguised cry for help. It forces us to question the authenticity of interactions, and to recognize that the brightest people may be hiding the darkest shadows. The smile was the most sellable part of the Zac Efron product, but it may also have been the clearest symptom of the void that early success left behind. Zac Efron's casting as Kevin Von Erich in The Iron Claw was more than brilliant casting. It was an act of psychological confluence. The film tells the tragic story of the Von Erich family, a wrestling dynasty destroyed by the pressure of a domineering patriarch, the relentless pursuit of perfection, and a series of unimaginable tragedies. In diving into this role, Efron was not just acting. He was channeling his own experiences with the pressure of fame, the expectations of masculinity, and the pain of losing an authentic identity under the weight of external expectations. The physical transformation for the role was once again extreme, but this time the focus was not on beach aesthetics, but on the functional, heavy mass of a wrestler. This physicality carried a symbolic weight. Kevin Von Erich's body was his tool and his prison, just as Efron's body has been for him. The physical pain of the training and the emotional pain of the character seemed to have merged. For an actor who used the physical as an escape, this role forced him to use his body as a vessel for trauma, perhaps allowing a confrontation with his own shadows in a way that real life did not permit. The concept of catharsis through art is central here. Psychology suggests that portraying complex emotions can allow an actor to process their own repressed feelings. In The Iron Claw, Efron portrays a man who survives while everyone around him succumbs to tragedy. He is the last man standing, a survivor haunted by guilt and grief. This survival narrative echoes Efron's own journey through addiction and the crushing pressures of Hollywood. The role may have offered him a safe avenue to explore the sadness and trauma that the idol's mask always forced him to hide. However, the line between catharsis and re-traumatization is thin. Diving into such a dark role can also be dangerous, especially for someone with a history of mental health struggles. The risk is that the character's pain reopens old wounds or intensifies feelings of emptiness and despair. The acclaim he received for the role is a testament to his skill, but it also raises an uncomfortable question. Are we celebrating the performance without acknowledging the real psychological cost to the artist? Are we applauding his exposed pain, mistaking his anguish for entertainment? The Iron Claw represents a turning point in Zac Efron's career and possibly his psychological journey. It's where the mask slipped more than ever before, revealing the depth and pain that were always there. The film is a powerful reminder that art can be a mirror, reflecting not only a character's story, but the unspoken truths of the actor's soul. Kevin Von Erich's pain became a channel for Zac Efron's pain, and in witnessing it, we witness the shattering of the perfect facade. What you are seeing is the deconstruction of a myth, an analysis that goes beyond the headlines. If this dive into the psyche is resonating with you, show your support. Like this video, subscribe to The Truth, Dark Psychology, and tell us in the comments which facade you want us to expose next. The truth isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. Let's continue. In 2021, the digital world went into a frenzy when Zac Efron appeared in a video with a visibly altered face, particularly his jaw. The immediate reaction was one of mockery and speculation, with accusations of botched plastic surgery. The truth, revealed later, was that he had suffered a serious accident at home, shattering his jaw and requiring a recovery that altered his facial muscles. This event is psychologically significant because it represented a literal and symbolic breaking of the mask. His most valuable asset, the perfect face that made him famous, was forcibly altered, beyond his control. The public's reaction to this change was a microcosm of the cruelty of fame culture. The same audience that built him up as a beauty icon was ready to ridicule him the moment he deviated from that ideal. From a dark psychology perspective, this exposes the conditional nature of fan adoration. The affection was not for the human being, but for the aesthetic object. For Efron, already struggling with agoraphobia and social anxiety, this wave of public judgment about his appearance must have been a validation of his worst fears about the world's scrutiny. However, the loss of the perfect face may have, paradoxically, been a liberating event. By having his iconic image altered by an accident, he was forced to detach from an ideal that was, in any case, a prison. The breaking of the physical mask may have created space for greater authenticity. When his appearance, the foundation of his manufactured persona, was taken from him, what remained was the man underneath. This event, combined with his ongoing journey of sobriety, marked a turning point from a life lived for the camera to a life that needed to be lived for himself. Efron's journey to sobriety is the central struggle against the inner void. Addiction to alcohol and drugs, as he described it, was a social lubricant to cope with the pressure of fame. Getting sober meant having to face anxiety and discomfort head-on, without the chemical crutch. It meant learning to live inside his own skin, without the need to numb the pain of not feeling good enough. Sobriety is the final act of removing the internal mask, a process far more terrifying than any physical change. Together, the accident and sobriety represent the deconstruction of the Zac Efron product. They are chaotic and painful events that forced a reevaluation of his identity, away from the spotlight and expectations. The shattered jaw was the physical manifestation of a psychological breakdown that had been building for years. It was the moment the facade could no longer be maintained, paving the way for a more honest and, hopefully, more resilient reconstruction of the self-doubt in recent years. Zac Efron has made a conscious decision to physically distance himself from Hollywood, spending long periods in Australia and other places far from the epicenter of the entertainment industry. This is not just a change of scenery. It is a geographic escape that symbolizes a psychological escape. Hollywood was not just a workplace for him. It was the crime scene of his stolen identity, the environment that fostered his anxieties, his addiction, and his body dysmorphia. Leaving the physical place is an attempt to leave behind the toxic value system it represents. From a psychological perspective, this search for isolation is a self-preservation strategy. Having identified the Hollywood environment as a trigger for his mental health issues, including agoraphobia, removing himself from it is a logical and necessary step toward healing. It is an acknowledgement that, to find his true self, he needed silence, away from the constant noise of expectations, paparazzi, and industry pressures. The self-imposed exile is an attempt to create a safe space, where the mask is no longer necessary for day-to-day survival. However, a geographic escape also has its psychological risks. Changing locations does not guarantee an internal change. A person can take their demons with them, no matter where they go. Isolation can turn from protective to harmful, deepening feelings of loneliness if not accompanied by active inner work to build a new community and a new sense of purpose. His series Down to Earth can be seen as his attempt to do just that, to find meaning and connection outside the Hollywood model of fame, focusing on sustainability and well-being. This withdrawal is also an act of reclaiming control. Throughout his youth, his life was dictated by agents, studios, and public demand. Choosing where and how to live is perhaps one of the first acts of genuine autonomy in his adult life. It is him saying no to the game that almost destroyed him. It is a rejection of the narrative that relevance in Hollywood is the ultimate goal in life, a search for a more personal and sustainable definition of success. It is the pursuit of a life, not just a career, Zac Efron's exile from Hollywood is therefore a complex act of surrender and power. It is a surrender to the reality that he cannot win the Hollywood game on its terms without sacrificing himself. And it is an act of power in choosing to redefine the game entirely. He teaches us that sometimes the bravest decision is not to keep fighting in a toxic environment, but to have the wisdom and strength to withdraw and find a place where it's possible to simply be. At the heart of Zac Efron's psychological journey is the concept of the inner void. This is the hollow feeling that arises when an entire life is built on external validation. From a young age, his worth was measured by his popularity, his appearance, and his box office success. He became an object of desire for millions. But this desire did not fill the space where a sense of self should have grown. The void is the price of living as everyone's dream while sacrificing your own in the process. This feeling of emptiness is a common root cause for addiction and other self-destructive behaviors. Alcohol, drugs, or the obsession with one's body are attempts to temporarily fill this hole in the soul. They provide a fleeting sense of fullness, control, or escape, but in the end, they only make the void deeper when the effect wears off. Efron's battle with addiction was not just a fight against substances. It was a fight against the nothingness he felt inside, a symptom of losing his identity to the fame machine. Toxic masculinity exacerbates this void. The pressure to be strong, successful, and emotionless prevents men like Efron from seeking help or expressing their vulnerability. The mask of idealized masculinity is just as rigid as that of the pop idol. Admitting to pain, anxiety, or depression is seen as a failure. Therefore, the void is kept secret, nurtured in darkness, becoming a well of silent despair. Efron's journey toward authenticity is therefore also a journey to redefine what it means to be a man, away from restrictive stereotypes. The search for darker roles and a simpler life can be seen as a conscious attempt to fill the void with something real, with purpose, with meaningful art, with genuine human connections, far from the superficiality of Hollywood. It is the search for intrinsic worth, a value that does not depend on public approval or physical perfection. It is the slow, difficult journey of building an inner self when the exterior was the only thing that mattered for so long. Zac Efron's story is, ultimately, a cautionary tale about the nature of happiness and success. He had everything that our culture tells us we should want: fame, fortune, beauty. And yet, he felt empty. His story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The relentless pursuit of external validation is a path to misery. The real work of life is not to become someone else's dream, but to have the courage to discover and live your own, no matter how imperfect or different it may seem to the rest of the world. The perfect mask always hides the deepest scars. The journey to remove it is lonely, but it is the only journey that leads to the truth. Thank you for joining us for another deep analysis here at The Truth, Dark Psychology. If you are tired of facades and seek a deeper understanding of the human condition, you are in the right place. Subscribe, turn on notifications so that the truth always finds you, and leave your opinion in the comments. What does Zac Efron's story reveal about our own relationship with fame and perfection? The real conversation starts now. Until next time.